The live stream was full of questions from the beginning to the end. Thank you, Russell, for handling the many questions. We actually answered all the questions first, but we heard numerous times in the survey app an interest in the new Exchange Lab, the similarities between the two share spaces and the Exchange Lab. Our focus today will be to answer those questions and more. With that, I would like to welcome Russell and Jordan. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks very much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Ari.
So question one to you, Jordan. Tell me a bit about the new Exchange Lab.
Sure. So I've been with the Exchange Lab myself since May. And I think what I've come to appreciate since being here is that the Exchange Lab is really kind of two things working in harmony at the same time. One is it's a physical space. So when we talk about the Exchange Lab, it's a physical location where there's an actual physical laboratory, but it's also a bit of a virtual community that exists in parallel. And an example like this podcast we're doing right now is an example of one of those pieces of that. So I think when I'm talking a little bit more today probably about the physical side of things, but the new Exchange Lab is really an evolution of the first Exchange Lab. And so the first one was on Douglas Street, I think 1012 Douglas Street. And it's really kind of that startup mentality, just figuring out a way to do it, and do it being supporting agile digital service delivery teams. And really it was, a colleague of mine described it as, a bunker as a service. It was a room as a service type thing in the sense that it gave to work in this way. You need a workspace that enables you to work in this way and allows teams to really get together, co-work, co-locate, and co-develop things in real time, day after day. And so they really just needed a space to do that a lot of traditional workspaces didn't have. And so on one hand, it was here's a space to go do that work. But on the other hand, too, it was an opportunity for them to exit their existing workspaces, which didn't allow that, and to get a kind of a different culture and a different environment to do that work. So I think the new Exchange Lab kind of takes those lessons, and it's just down the street, a couple blocks, 808 Douglas. And it kind of takes some of the lessons that we've had from the pandemic as well, in the sense that that way of working also is enabled through technology now. And so people can jump in a Teams chat or Teams meeting and different audiovisual connections and have that sense of closeness and that way of co-developing and co-working through hybrid environments as well. So that dedicated space to just really call your own and come to that space is not really needed. And I think people really are enjoying the flexibility of working from home and in certain whatever schedule they can afford. So the Exchange Lab space is really, it's a completely flexible space that holds up to about 85 full-time employees. But you can reconfigure the space to support, agile service delivery teams, from 4 people to 12 people. You can do support large demonstration, lunch and learns, training activities, large planning sessions, big alignment planning sessions, kind of everything in between. I think we're excited to see what the different iterations of the space will be in the sense of as people start playing with it and getting creative with it. But it's a space that really enables people to come in and book the space so that the workspace is needed to support the work they need to do, not just the place where they go to work.
Yeah, because it's a new world of work that we've entered, and we're just about to enter another new world of work. Can you explain a little bit more about how we have this first iteration already set up, but it's for the user to kind of create?
Yeah, in the sense, I think the first Exchange Lab really, here it was kind of, you came in as a team, you were assigned as a room, you had that room, you owned that room. Where we're going now is basically that a team or even just individual members of the digital community will be able to interface through space software booking to book space to do whatever work they need to do. So they might need to bring in 30 people. Maybe it's bringing in their agile team plus their alliance team plus a whole bunch of business people, and they need to work through a problem, do planning, do a realignment, whatever it is. They will be able to book and organize the space to allow them to do that. It might just be that they're like, hey, I'm just would like to be able to go sit in a lunchroom with other developers and just hear what's going on with other ministries and things like that. So you'll be able to book and book a desk and come work at the Exchange Lab as well.
Thanks. So what do you both see the relationship of the share space and the Exchange Lab? Russell?
Sure. Yeah. Just sort of building on what Jordan just said, I think there's a lot of synergy between these two spaces, these two initiatives, operationally, culturally, and from a strategic innovation perspective as well. They both provide an unparalleled variety of modern, shared, on-demand government workspace to all employees. So now, as Jordan mentioned, if employees need a certain type of workspace for either individual or group collaborative work, they can simply reserve exactly what they need when they need it. So even if you're the junior person on the job for the first day and you need an enclosed office, you can book an enclosed office. You don't have to wait 20 years until you're an executive. So with a flexible model like this, the province could potentially operate in about half the amount of office space it currently holds. As well, the Exchange Lab and ShareSpace also both make use of a new position called a community manager, who's totally invested in building sort of a thriving community of mobile workers in these shared spaces and creating a high quality user experience. And so I feel like this new position is something that's going to grow in popularity and will form a community of practice of its own. So together, I feel like the Exchange Lab and ShareSpace are the start of a tipping point for a new culture of work and setting a new standard for how and why we even need office space at all. So I'm excited that now we have two live future-focused proof of concepts, for how the public service can be using office space more smartly, that will culturally better support its mobile workforce and their well-being into sort of a post-pandemic future. And I think we'll be able to better grow, stronger together and support each other in the development of these new concepts.
I'm pretty excited about a community manager position. Can you give me a story or two of how the community manager has affected this space?
So we have two community managers currently, and they are kind of like the face of the initiative, the face of this new way of working. So when you walk in the door, you have a personal connection immediately. They want to help you craft your best day at work possible. So in addition to the sort of the day-to-day operations, they're also forming a personal connection with you. So they'll know your preferences and they'll make connections to other users. And so the community naturally grows. And I'm just trying to think of a specific story I can tell.
Well, while you think, I've got one that makes me think from past. You were telling me something about this music thing to create a lot of fun, like a fun vibe in the room.
Yeah, I mean, part of creating this sort of culture of users is, it's more than just about work. It's about camaraderie. And so our community managers are coming up with ideas for how to bring the community together. And some of those ideas are like Music Mondays. So there's, a playlist of music in the lobby area where people can come and have coffee and sit and chat together. We have some interactive games that are ongoing throughout the month, and there's prizes to be won. You can win like a Tim Hortons gift certificate if you're a particular winner in these games. We have a sort of a book exchange where people can bring in their used books or old movies, and people can put and take from that. So, it's like ideas like this. And they're trying to be innovative. They're trying to capture people's attention, and then they're trying to bring people to the space as well. So spread the word.
One of the things that strikes me too from that role is it kind of brings the workspace alive, in the sense of like a lot of our office space is constructed around kind of enabling someone to work in a space and kind of be self-contained. Whereas I think, and it's kind of a flat environment, right? It's you just kind of come in, you come out. Whereas a community manager, I think, kind of looks at how do we bring life into the space, and then also how do we respond to the feedback of the users of the space, so that we're kind of almost looking at the space as a service. And really, that's at the heart of a lot of innovation efforts, and a lot of even just in the digital service delivery realm. That's, you listen to your users, you respond to their feedback, and you make the service better. So here's a role that is focused on how do we keep this alive? And how do we keep the experience of you coming to the office as seen as valuable for you?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think as a result, employees and workers are quick to protect the space. They're quick to promote it. They become an advocate for this way of working immediately because they see their feedback and their ideas implemented. They feel heard. Sometimes you won't get that at a normal ministry headquarters space where you feel like you're just, a number or a cubicle in a vast sea of cubicles. So it's pretty exciting to see that feedback.
And we saw that passion both in the questions in Slido during the digital live stream, as well as the survey responses. People who have been working in the share space really like this experience.
And, I think one of the other things too that kind of comes to mind to me is one of the barriers I've either heard in previous work experience or even just like lived is that idea of giving up residency over a space or ownership over a space. Like, okay, well, I don't have, where am I going to put my pictures, or where am I going to put, my thing, or what desk is mine? And so I've lived that experience recently where I came to this job. I haven't had a fixed work point that's been mine for, 8 months or so. It is exceptionally freeing. You realize like what you don't need. It allows you to be flexible. Yes, you're still, everyone's going to have different habits and probably, there's going to be areas that they don't like, that kind of thing. But when you start thinking about the space as a whole, as yours, like as Russ, as you were talking about, like I'm protective of the space, but you start thinking about that entire installation as part of your home, not just your desk within it. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. It builds a community just in that alone to start, even without a community manager to make it that much better.
Yeah.
So what do you see, Jordan, about the relationship between the share space and the Exchange Lab?
Yeah, I see the Exchange Lab really as just a digital version, Exchange Lab, a share space that is focused on the digital community. So it's really kind of in the same bucket as the share space, which is open to the entire BC Public Service. So those in the digital community as well. So I think they're kind of achieving the same things. But I think we talked about, it allows for flexibility. It allows for your workspace to be of value to you. I think the other thing, so I won't kind of repeat the things that the rest said, but I think the other thing that comes out is that cross-ministry collaboration piece. So, and we are all part of one team, BC Gov, right? So these silos that get created, not necessarily always the most helpful, and sometimes we're doing things that are very aligned to each other, or we're building the same wheel over and over again. So just even through, the idea of a modern work lounge. So not just your small lunchroom that gets used roughly 2 hours of any day, but a larger space that really can be used all times of the day for working and then when you need to eat. And it's amazing when you're in that type of space, you just run into people and you overhear people talking about this problem or that problem, and they go, hey, well, actually I dealt with this, or hey, I know that person. We saw this in the first iteration of the Exchange Lab. Most people just huddled around the lunchroom, right? But these type of spaces allow for those kind of natural collisions where people can start talking about things and making those connections. And if you think about a lot of the problems that the public policy problems or the public problems that a lot of us are trying to engage with right now, a lot of them are cross-ministry, cross-sector, they're not neatly just fitting into one box. So I think more of that collaboration is a good thing.
Yeah, even being part of the old 1012 Douglas Exchange Lab, even being in the kitchen, it wasn't perfect, but people as a community cleaned up the kitchen more than I'd ever seen in another office because they were in it a lot. And so they saw people around, and so they took care of it, which was lovely. If you could share a moonshot or a big goal for the new Exchange Lab, what would it be? Jordan?
Yeah, I think thinking about it both in the physical and the virtual spaces, I'd like to see the Exchange Lab grow as a space of experimentation, connection, collaboration, just towards awesome digital service delivery. And I don't say those words, some of those words are kind of buzzy, let's collaborate and let's share and those things. So I mean them earnestly, and just we were talking about cross-ministry collaboration is a good example. So where people actually are coming together and what they're producing is greater than the sum of their parts. And experimentation, I think, also is part of that piece and that's a big culture, I think, in the Exchange Lab, is the idea with experimenting is it's okay to fail. And as long as it's good failure where you're failing fast and you're learning from your failure and applying that forward, that's a hard thing to break. And I don't think that nut's been cracked as far as creating that safe environment where people feel okay to fail or even okay to report that they're struggling or stuck, things like that. So I think creating that, a colleague of mine kind of says the psychological safety to do that, I think is something I would love to see us grow. I think we're kind of at a point too where we're in this transition of the pre-exchange lab, then the COVID pandemic experience. We're still very much in the pandemic experience. It's hard to know where that'll go. I would just love to see, I think, the exchange lab be a thriving community coming out or moving into whatever 2022 has to offer. So it's hard to say, out of the pandemic, because no one knows, I think, what's going to happen there. But in a way, it can thrive in a safe way, kind of into the next phases of the pandemic. So.
Yeah, and even to the sharing, Russell and I had a moment to talk before, and we have a new community manager that's going to be starting in a few weeks, and we already want to piggyback off what they've done, so we don't have to create this new space from scratch. Even though we have past information from what we've used, we're going to have a community of practice where we can start off on square 3 or square 4 where they've gotten to and build from that, because it's the same, and we can add instead of starting from scratch. To you, Russell, moonshot or big goal for the new Exchange Lab, what would you think it'd be?
Ultimately, I think if I distill it right down, it's, improving our day at work, creating a more inspired day at work. We've had lots of folks tour through ShareSpace. I think we've had about 300 tours since it opened in February. And, a lot of people come to us and say, if I knew that government workspace was like this, or if I could work in government workspace that felt like this, I would feel more inspired. And so the idea of, shifting our work culture to this idea of a shared workspace that's creative, inspired, thought-provoking, and, goes beyond borders, I'd say that's probably a pretty good shared goal. I think since a large percentage of our population is going to continue working remotely or from home at least 2 days a week into the foreseeable future, I think we can obviously move to having less office space overall. So with that, we're reducing our environmental impacts. We're reducing the annual amount of money we spend on leased and owned real estate to accommodate our workforce. So, there's lots of benefits. And so if ShareSpace and the Exchange Lab and the ideas that they're promoting continue to catch on, it begins to normalize this practice of a universally accessible, borderless government office. And so, if I'm thinking specifically ShareSpace, I'm thinking, we imagine this sort of network of ShareSpace that are strategically placed around the province, where each location supports several thousand public service employees closer to where they live, rather than several hundred employees in an expensive, underutilized location where workers are having to commute several hours a day. And, that's kind of the model we're currently using. So hopefully this can shift us in a positive direction towards the future.
And just to kind of build on that too, I think I'm very much in agreement with what Russ was saying there. But I think we're going to need to do that just to be able to attract the talent we're going to need from the BC Public Service. I'm thinking probably more from the digital talent perspective, but from a geographic perspective, we need to, pull from every corner of the province we can. And, we can't ask people to move to Vancouver and Victoria because they won't do it. The cost of living is doesn't allow for it, whatever the case may be. But we're going to have to attract and then retain people from every corner of the province, and not just in the digital side, from every facet of the BC Public Service. We have a lot of niche areas in the BC Public Service where the talent pool isn't huge. So I think that's going to be a key part. I'll add just a quick story of just to kind of build on what Russ said. We recently had a senior Scrum Master join our group at the Exchange Lab, and coming from private sector, they had that similar experience too, where they kind of were saying, if I would have known that this is what it's going to be like to come to the BC government and work in this field, I would have come sooner. And just because they were expecting that, the kind of the joke, are you ready to join that, highly flexible, modern, fast-paced work environment? And then they arrive at their gray cubicle, right? So I think these type of spaces are kind of showing like, hey, no, we are with it. We're modern, and not just in kind of like, well, here's the equipment and here's the things, but actually then living and working in that way to support it.
Yeah, it's an experience. So how do you see these spaces supporting service delivery for the citizens of BC? Jordan?
Yeah, I think there's maybe a couple of thoughts here in my head. One is I'm thinking about the need for digital service delivery in general. And so that then necessitates the need for digital service delivery teams to form, and they have to work in a certain way. And therefore, then the space needs to support that. But if I got to go back to the starting need of saying, okay, well, digital service delivery need, I think if you think about the pandemic experience for a lot of us, the channel, I guess, of digital service delivery has been there and it's been growing for a number of years, but the pandemic accelerated it by 1,000 times. And the need for us to get service delivery to people, sometimes our most vulnerable people, sometimes our hardest to reach people, and in a way that's safe. And so people want to be able to access the things they need, and usually they're critical things that they need really fast, and sometimes, through their smartphone. So that transition to digital government, I think, just only got accelerated through the pandemic, and more businesses, I think, are starting to think about digital service delivery, not just as something that their IT group does, but really as essentially part of their business. So not just the back end of their business, but now more the front end of their business. So I see that is a key thing just to responding to the needs of BC citizens. This is a need. This is something they're asking for. How are we going to provide it? So then I see it then as we need to build these enabling cultures and these enabling supports and communities to support this change, but also these teams. And therefore then the Exchange Lab, I think it helps in that effort.
And to that point, communities that were talking to each other in government, that are talking to each other a lot more now because of the speed that they need to work in. And Russell, how do you see these spaces supporting service delivery for the citizens of BC?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really interesting question because, we've continued to deliver services without interruption to the citizens for the last 2 years during a pandemic with barely a need for office space at all. And this is in part because I think we've come together to solve new problems and think about our business in new ways, as I mentioned earlier. However, I think, what these shared spaces like the Exchange Lab and ShareSpace will do is contribute to a happier, more engaged, more innovative workforce, which I think in turn will translate over time to the delivery of services to citizens in more effective and more innovative or modern ways. And we're already seeing how this spirit of innovation in these new shared spaces, where new ways of working, an idea exchange within them, are simply shaping new behaviors at work. Inspiring new ideas, encouraging work units to reimagine or even transform the way they accomplish work. So I think now more than ever, the citizens of BC are going to want to know that their public service is a modern, forward-thinking organization that's agile enough to constantly be evolving with, the challenges of a modern world, and not simply trying to return or reinstate old ways of thinking.
Yeah, and that's really exciting. It goes back to what Jordan was saying with the new senior Scrum Master going, this is government?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're even seeing, a younger demographic coming into these spaces. And, kind of like Jordan said earlier, geez, if I had known the BC public servants was quote unquote cool, I would have considered it as a legitimate job, a place that they'd want to work, right?
And when those people come in and they have those experiences too, then then they start talking to their other people, and good talent brings good talent. So I think that's something too. It has a kind of that multiplying effect as well. I think too, when we talk about modern ways of working, a lot of times we're talking about more like multidisciplinary teams that are more self-organizing. And I think, again, too, if we think about the problems and the challenges, and I mentioned this before, but that we're trying to engage with, like those org structures that are more like hierarchical and more focused on managing risk, maybe than enabling innovation, they might not be as fast to pivot and respond to the things that are the changes that are happening out there. And so I think that's another lesson that's come through the pandemic. And I'm not saying it's a wholesale change. It's a transition that'll happen over time. And there's lots of good reasons for different org structures all over the place. But I think just increasing our agility, our business agility in general, is a good thing because the environment, the external environment, seems to be changing so fast and so profoundly. If you just think about the last, say, 5 years in BC, even before the pandemic, we were talking about wildfires, and now we have floods and a whole bunch of different other economic disruptions that happen too. So their ability to just pivot and have teams pivot really quickly, I think will be a good thing, and it'll enable us to provide better service to BC citizens.
So how do you see both the new Exchange Lab and ShareSpace affecting culture in the BC government? You've already both alluded to it quite a lot, but what else do you have on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're already seeing how it's starting to play out at our Lake Point ShareSpace in Langford. People are choosing to be in these spaces. Even during a pandemic, they're choosing to come into these spaces. And I touched on the live stream we're asking the question, why is that? And I think part of it is they're enjoying that flexibility and choice that these shared office spaces are providing. And as a result, they're, happier and they want to give back to the organization. And, there are lots of benefits for them. Increased productivity and engagement, enhanced capacity to collaborate digitally or virtually, the idea exchange across the organization, and potentially a significant improvement to their work-life balance and well-being. I mean, we've got so many stories from users of how it has personally affected their lives to have these sort of alternative workspaces that are closer to their home, whether it's, being able to spend more time with their friends and family, not commute as far for folks that are coming from Up Island into Victoria normally. We even had an example of someone who'd worked in the public service for 35 years, and she'd been pushing for an office to open in the Western communities. And she contacted our community managers because she wanted to be the first person in the door, just as this sort of signifier. So our community managers made it happen. And but people are very passionate about this idea. So I'd also add that, and this sort of builds on what Jordan was talking about earlier, I think during the first phases of the pandemic a couple of years ago, a lot of workers reported their engagement actually went up. And I think it was because, we were forced to solve this new set of problems, getting on a Zoom call for the first time, using technology to collaborate and connect to colleagues in a way that we had never done before. So in a way, there's this sort of sense of excitement because people felt involved. They felt this sense of agency, a new degree of control and influence over their work. And I think the more the people can feel like they're having an impact in their job or are having, some choice, the more they become motivated and engaged. So, if this flexibility and choice can be an ongoing key ingredient in the culture at work, an accepted practice, let's say, I think that culture itself will become a productivity accelerator. And I think I mentioned that in the live stream. Productivity comes from feeling engaged, like you're contributing to something meaningful.
I'm curious have you heard any stories about mental health, but just being in the share space, like a good experience from that?
Because I think that's something that's been going along in parallel as well through the pandemic, is that focus on mental health and resilience as well. And so I think that flexibility and having that flexibility for and that kind of empowerment for each person to choose where they're going to work and have that workspace really support their day, as you said, Russ, the more inspired work day, right? I think that really has helped with people's mental health as well. Obviously, I don't have a stat in front of me, but I'll say from my own experience, for instance, I have a 2-year-old at home, small house. My wife is a BC public servant as well. Some childcare happens in the home. There's days where I just need to get out of the house for my own sanity, and going to the workspace offers me a better place to be productive. It gives me a mental reprieve. It gives me a social outlet that with other people. And sometimes you just can't replace face-to-face interactions, even at over 2 meters distance. But still, that it's meaningful. And so I think it's just giving people the tools to manage what they need to do on a day-to-day level. That helps for sure. And so when you are feeling productive, that is that instant feedback of like, hey, I did something, I accomplished something. That's a positive mental health experience as well. So I think that it gives people more. And then there's days where maybe you're not feeling as great and you want to maybe work from home, but you're still productive. And now it's not a sick day, and it's a day I'm being productive and I'm working, but in an environment that supports how I'm doing that day as well.
I can add an example as well. From a physical design perspective, I think, we're starting to incorporate spaces like wellness rooms. For example, the Lake Point Share Space includes a wellness room, which is a dedicated space where someone can go and decompress, be by themselves, put on some soft music, and just take time, and that's supported by the environment. And so we're looking at how, spaces can support well-being, could be the community managers are bringing in, yoga instructors to do communal yoga together. Thinking of health and well-being activities in the workplace as well is also something we're considering for ShareSpace.
And just to add on that too is, I think, a lot of times we talk about changing culture in our organizations. And I think one of the things that sometimes gets lost in that, I don't think it's lost on us in this room today, is just the importance of your physical environment to contributing or even impairing the environment or culture you're trying to create. So I think that was something that was a big lesson that came out of the first exchange lab, was it created like that, the physical space enabled the culture to exist. And so I think it's in and of itself, the space supports the culture because it allows people to work in a different way. I think I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, 100%. When teams did not want to leave the lab, 99% of the time, they're just like, how can I stay longer? And to your point, Jordan, I don't have a young child. I have myself in the home, usually by myself, and I'm used to working. I had my own in private sector. I worked in the home for 3 years. Loved it. When I've come into the office, especially since the pandemic, just to see live people 6 feet or more in the room and getting to talk to them, it's been really great.
Yeah, we had a story of a married couple that worked in government, and they, of course, could work at home. They had a small child who was just entering daycare for the first time, but they chose to work at ShareSpace, where there was a daycare right across the street, and they'd all commute to the share space together, drop their daughter off at the daycare, and literally be able to wave at her from across the street, visit her on their lunch hour, and then all go home together at the end of the day, rather than, commuting separately to their ministry specific building in Victoria. So getting that time back together as a family, I think, has really impacted people's lives.
Yeah, big time. Any final thoughts from either of you? Jordan?
Yeah, I think I just, for those that maybe the Exchange Lab is something new to them, or even ShareSpace as a concept, I think probably the next question will be, okay, well, how do I join these spaces? So I'll let Russ speak to the share space piece, but I think for the Exchange Lab, we have not also been immune to the effects of the pandemic as well, and so we're still working through some final pieces. So our community manager just was hired. We're working on a few details as far as kind of space booking and things like that. So there'll be some more information coming out later this winter about how you can actually access the Exchange Lab and do all the great things we were talking about. The best way probably for you to make sure that you're on top of that information is just to ensure that you're subscribed to the Exchange Lab newsletter. And we'll have some announcement and some information there, and then we'll have some stuff posted on our web presence after that. So,
Jordan? Russell?
Yeah, in terms of final thoughts, I think we have an unprecedented opportunity right now to move our culture, organizational culture, positively towards the future of work. With LWS, some people are well aware of LWS, and now with ShareSpace and initiatives like the Exchange Lab, BC's already seen as an organizational leader for innovative workplace strategies and cultures by many jurisdictions in Canada, North America, even abroad, and they're reaching out to us. In fact, IFMA, so the International Facility Management Association, has actually just published a new book called Work on the Move, and there's a chapter in it called The Hybrid Workplace, Reimagining the Future of Work After the Pandemic, which includes the Lake Point ShareSpace as a case study. So, this concept's already having an international influence, and we need to continue to just build support internally to grow these ideas. And so, understanding that government has always been a risk-averse environment that's sometimes slow to change for good reasons, I think, the long-term benefits as a result of moving to a hybrid work model supported by on-demand shared spaces like the Exchange Lab and ShareSpace are going to far outweigh sort of the temporary initial frustration and inconvenience of the change.
Thanks again, Russell and Jordan, for taking the time to share your thoughts, and thanks for listening to the viewers. I hope you enjoyed the continued conversation of the new Exchange Lab, building community for the modernized workforce. I would love to hear your feedback, comments, and suggestions. You could connect with me at ra.hirschberg.ca or click the link in the show notes to share your thoughts. Thanks for listening.